Clay Moss is with us this morning. Good morning, Clay.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Okay, so first of all, the first question, I tried to pronounce this correctly. Vexillologist, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
That's the pronunciation. So a vexillologist is a person like yourself who studies flags. How does that all come about? How do you become someone who gets so interested in this and wants to learn the details?
Well, my story was when I was young, I was just mesmerized by flags flying on a flagpole. When I was very young, we lived out in Hawaii, and a large masted yacht sailed into one of the civilian harbors one day, and I was just amazed by the flags on it, so I had to know what they were. And I happened to have an old National Geographic September 1934 issue that was about flags, and so this particular ship had a British flag in the corner of the flag itself, a blue background and a badge, actually a red background and a badge. Well, I found the badge. It was Fiji. It was British colonial Fiji, and I was hooked after that. So I had to know all about these badges and then other flags, and it sort of morphed from there. I wasn't entirely interested in flags at that age. I wasn't but about 7 then, but got more intellectually involved later as I got older.
It's so fascinating because even for me, I've always understood what flags stood for and their meanings, but not in detail. And looking at, because this is so important for Mississippi right now, this is historical for us to change our flag. The mandate was to get anything off that removes a Confederate emblem. Right now, from what I understand, the only real requirement is that it has to say somewhere on there, read in there, "In God We Trust." We're down to 5 right now. I didn't realize this. We started out with 3,000 initial entries for ideas for a new flag for the state. Then it was narrowed down by the panel to 146, then to 9, and now we're down to 5. I know that you've looked at these closely. For people that don't really understand what's on the flag, 4 of the 5 have a magnolia, which that's obvious because we're the magnolia state. I think everyone understands that. There's a gold star among the circle of stars. Tell us about the 20 stars that are on the choices right now that we're down to, and then that gold star in particular.
The 20 stars represent the fact that Mississippi is the 20th state in the U.S. The gold star in particular is a little bit larger. It's also segmented, if you've noticed, into 5 parts within the center, so each point is a separate part. That was a request and a suggestion from Choctaw Chief Cyrus Ben. The diamond is a very significant symbol and part of Choctaw history because pre-colonial and then pre-Western era, they considered the diamondback rattler to be a very important part of their culture. They would intentionally put diamondbacks in their fields to keep mice away and other varmints that would eat their crops. And so he felt like it was important that we remember that the Native Americans were here first, and that universally the diamond is a Native American symbol because of the diamondback rattler. So he made that appeal, and the committee agreed and thought that it could be incorporated in some way to have a double significance. And so it was the diamonds were modified just a bit, but then ultimately made into the star.
That's fascinating. We talked with the chief yesterday. We didn't go into great detail about that, but I didn't realize that about the diamondback. And so that kind of, I don't know, it gives you a warm and fuzzy because it does then create something that really represents us. So we've talked about that. The colors. How did we end up with these particular colors? Why is a color to a flag important for a state?
I think in Mississippi's case, we've always gravitated toward the U.S. colors, the colors of the American flag: Old Glory blue, white, and red. And so I think those are familiar with us. And so I think anytime somebody in Mississippi is designing a flag, not every time, it's not a universal truth, but a lot of the 3,000 plus flags that were submitted originally contain blue, white, or red. And I think it's simply because those are our American colors.
We see red and blue in all of them. The one only has blue. It's just blue with the gold star, white stars, and then the gold star, and then the tree that's in there. How important is it for a state flag to stand out amongst other state flags in our country?
Well, I think it's very important. We've had a lot of discussion about optimal flags. What does an optimal flag look like? They're really very simple, and they are distinct from other flags, and from a vexillographer standpoint, a vexillographer is somebody that actually studies flag design. You want to be able to recognize a flag outdoors at a great distance on a pole. And so, distinctiveness is very important. We have a lot of U.S. state flags. I meant to bring a flag chart and I didn't do it, but 20 plus 24, 25 U.S. state flags are solid blue with their state seals in the middle. So, they become indistinguishable from one another, particularly if all displayed together and maybe at a distance.
I grew up in Indiana, and although if you look at the two next to each other, the one choice of ours that is blue, and there's not a magnolia flower on there, it's not certainly identical to the Indiana state flag, but the Indiana state flag is dark blue and with gold, but that's about it. It's just very simple. And so when I saw the one choice, I thought that's beautiful, but to me it immediately struck that's too close to what I already know in another state. And I guess as a Mississippian and a voter, I think many are like me too. We want to see it really stand out. We don't want it to be gaudy, or it needs to be simplified and beautiful and have meaning, but we do want it to stand out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you want a flag that's going to be very different than anything else. And, the thing I've been thinking about in terms of flag design, I've heard a lot of talk about, flags being part of your state's iconography and being part of advertising and that type of thing. But it's not anybody can make something look good on a T-shirt or on a hat or on a piece of paper on stationery. The question is, how effective is the flag going to be on a flagpole outside? At the end of the day, flags are about being flown outdoors, being flown 40 feet above your head on a pole, being seen from a distance. And those need to be the factors. Sometimes an item that looks really good on paper won't necessarily translate into a good flag three-dimensionally when it's hanging limp on a pole or at 45 degrees or flying in reverse, and those types of things.
The governor mandated that it has to read "In God We Trust" somewhere on the flag, and they all do. All 5 finalists do. In one in particular, it's very prominent, and it's the one that looks like the shield. When I first saw it, it almost looks as if it's a police emblem, as if it's for our sisters and brothers in blue, because it's very prominent. In others, it's smaller. In Mississippi, how important will that be, do you think, to those that go out and vote on the flag choice, as to how prominent that saying is?
Well, we consider ourselves in Mississippi to be Christians. I'm a Christ follower. I came to know the Lord Jesus as my Savior when I was 19. I've heard a number of varying opinions from both evangelicals and from, of course, folks who aren't Christians and don't appreciate the fact that it's on there. As a general rule, lettering doesn't belong on flags. If we've always said, if you can't convey your message with a simple emblem, something's gone wrong. At the same time, I was talking to a couple of pastors who privately preferred it not be on there. They almost considered it to be an affront. But then I heard another dear friend who's a believer said, if one person sees that motto and comes to faith in Christ because it's there, then it's all been worthwhile. So the opinions have been all over the place in terms of whether or not it ought to be on there. I have no personal problem with it being there. As far as its size and its prominence, I haven't thought a lot about that. As far as how I've seen it displayed on virtually every design, I've liked how people have gone about doing it. There's a couple of our designs where the motto is incorporated within the ring of stars. On the I think they call it the Great River flag, the one with the shield. He's got it displayed at the bottom. Both ways work as far as I'm concerned. I think they placed the motto on the flag, all 5 flags, in an appropriate kind of way.
There was so much controversy about getting rid of our old state flag, and I think there might be some concession there. Adding "In God We Trust" is somewhat a way of saying we're going to hold something true to our values. We're not going to just wipe it clean. We're talking to Clay Moss this morning. He's a vexillologist. That's a person who studies flags. We're talking about the new Mississippi state flag, and I'm going to put him on the spot when we come back. We're going to talk to him about his favorites of the top 5 as they get narrowed down so that we can decide as voters in November. You're listening to The Gallo Show on SuperTalk. I'm Linda Allen, in with Perez this morning, talking to Clay Moss, who is a vexillologist that is an expert who studies flags. And we're talking about 5 flags right now that we've narrowed it down to from 3,000 submissions for Mississippi's new flag. From what I understand through the state, 48,000 of you have already placed votes, have already put in your input on what you think the state flag should be. And from what I'm reading, it looks as if they are going to make their final submission on September 2nd and submit that to Governor Reeves and the legislature, and then it comes on to us. Wanted to ask you, Clay, you mentioned a little bit about what it looks like on a flagpole. Do we know yet? The commission was scheduled to do that late this month. Have they already done that, put the 5 finalists on a flagpole to see what it looks like?
I doubt it, because they didn't make a decision about what they were going to run with until Tuesday. And there's no way that anybody, any flag printer could have made the flags up, gotten them hemmed and grommeted and back down to us. So I imagine that arrangement was made through somebody, probably a complete flag source, and they've asked them to be expedited for this purpose. So no, they're not up now, but they might be within the week or before September 5th, certainly. I think they're going to fly them out in front of the old Capitol building.
So they make an actual flag, a fabric flag, not something on paper or something that they look at in a book. It's actually something that is tangible, that would be like a flag that we would have.
You know, the technology exists now to literally almost photocopy a flag. They can take an image and put it in a machine and punch the button, and out comes a flag. You know, it'd be slower than a photocopy, but that technology's there. That's not entirely the way they print flags, but they can do that if they need a flag in a hurry or they need a one-off production of a flag. That technology's there, and people do it regularly.
What do you encourage us to look for when we start looking at these flags and putting our vote in? Because we can put our vote in now. It's not going to be at a ballot box, but you can go online right now and give your input. What do you want us to consider, and what are the things that you think that we should look for in our choices instead of just going, oh, that's a pretty color, I like that one?
People who study flag design have always said simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. You know, it's one thing to see a flag hang on a wall and you can walk up to it 3 or 4 feet away and identify the parts, the components. Can you see any of that at any particular distance? Sometimes it depends on the emblems, but oftentimes there's so much on a flag that it becomes indistinguishable once it's any kind of distance. Simplicity is the big thing. You know, I get leaned on a lot about these 5 flags and you know, which ones would I advocate or not advocate. First, I want to say this: the committee, they've had 3 weeks to do this, and that's an incredibly short period of time. Mm-hmm. And they were under the gun to do a lot of different things. They've been working hard. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for them. I've been kind of the background helping a little bit, communicating with them. So I want to commend them on their work to try to get where we are right now. Having said all that, if I were to show up first day and I didn't know anything about this process, and the 5 flags are laid out in front of me and I didn't know anything about the meanings, I'm just looking at the flags. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the Great River flag is the best designed basic flag. I don't know what it means. I don't know the shield, but it's clearly the best design in terms of seeing it from a greater distance. Even if that flag were flying at a considerable distance, you could clearly make out the shield, the star. You may not be able to read the motto, but you know, everything else would be more clear than some of the others right now. It's an incredibly difficult task when to develop a flag, especially when you're trying to include so many meanings in a flag. Oftentimes, it's better to try to just reduce your emblemery and then give those emblems multiple meanings, as opposed to, you know, adding so many things. And that's not intended to be a criticism. It's just it's an assessment of what works on a well-designed flag.
I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here, because when I look at it and I'm reading about it, it's saying that this shield that we're looking at, and it does look like a police officer's shield, it represents Mississippi's 1798 territorial seal. So that does make sense to me now, seeing that. But I guess when I look at that, I understand the squiggly lines that represent the Mississippi River, the Delta, and the Gulf Coast, but I have to read it to understand that. When I look at it, I guess it doesn't read, and I'm not being critical because I know an artist put a lot of time and effort into this, but it doesn't doesn't read Mississippi to me as well as some of the others. The magnolia makes sense to me. The flag that shows the state line, actually, you know, the division with the red and the blue, that I understand because it looks like our state. And so I'll be curious to see what happens and how voters do decide on this. And you, as an expert, look at it and go, hey, that's the clearest one. That's going to be the best one. Because let's face it, living in the South, we know that we always have storms, which means our governors and our leaders end up on national TV, right? With COVID, Governor Reeves has been on national news quite a bit talking about COVID in Mississippi, and that flag right next to the American flag is always so prominent and prevalent.
You know, even if you felt like Mississippi's former flag was controversial, it was distinct and it was a good design. And so based on the model we've had to work with in the past, I think it's going to be important that we come up with something that at least mimics the quality of the design, whether you agreed with the emblems in it or not. That's really an aside in terms of a basic flag design. I think there are pros and cons literally to every flag out there. The particular design that's got the whole Mississippi in the side, you know, that's going to look very different in reverse when you fly it. It's a very unconventional look, and I'm not so certain that I call it a contemporary design. I'm not so certain, you know, we might end up having buyer's remorse if that ended up being the flag, because it's so different. And I'm not. And I'm not telling you not to pick it. I'm just saying.
Oh, sure.
I'm not certain at the end of the day, hanging on a pole and being the state's emblem, that we might want to go that direction. But then we may. You know, the people in Mississippi are going to make an ultimate decision as to which flag they want to see on the ballot, and then the larger state, of course, will vote thumbs up or thumbs down in November.
And
again,
help me out with this, because I'm a little bit confused. I'm sorry, Clay, I didn't mean to cut you. We're kind of on a delay here. I wanted to touch on that before you finish that sentence, because I'm a little bit confused. So we can vote on it online, but the commission is actually going to present it just one choice that would end up on a ballot. Am I saying that right?
That's correct. Again, as best I understand it, then in November, as people vote, they're going to have the option of saying whether or not they like that flag. And I guess
so
they're going to tabulate
it's yay or nay. Yeah. It's yay or nay.
Yay or nay. They're going to tabulate on the number of collective votes. If 100,000 people vote and 49,000 people like the flag, then it didn't make it. And the committee starts again, round two. And so, we'll see. We'll see what happens in November on election day for everything.
What happens during the interim? We've retired the flag. In June, we retired our old flag. If it's not resolved in November, then we continue to go without a state flag?
You know, it sounds like we will. I actually wrote a letter to Philip Gunn and Delbert Hoseman and the governor saying we need to put something up there in the interim. In my opinion, you may choose not to do it, but I thought something as simple as just remove the Confederate canton off the blue, white, and red stripes. At least we have something flying until a choice is made. But the other thing they may simply choose to do, particularly when the legislature is in session for the first time in history, fly American flags on either side of the Capitol chambers, on the domes, and just go that way. We just may be a state without a flag. That's very rare, but it's not unprecedented. There have been some controversies globally before where people simply couldn't decide on a flag, so they just chose not to have one. Well, that seems strange in our 21st century way of thinking, but it wouldn't be the first time that it happened.
We can do like they do on websites that are still in progress. It can say, work in session with a little worker man on it. Well, it's been fascinating talking with you, Clay. This is so much food for thought, so much that we all need to be thinking about when we choose our next flag. And I would assume that once we get one, we're going to have to live with it. So we have to make that choice wisely, as we do with any vote this coming November.
Well, I think, I think people feel under the gun like whatever particular flag we put up in November is our choice or nothing. The legislature's made it clear we'll allow this committee to continue to do what they do until we come up with the flag, however long it takes. Now, I don't think it's going to take years and years, but we may go around two. We may go to round two and they reevaluate what they put up there and they listen to the people a little bit more. And, we end up doing something that I don't know if the flag's going to unite us per se, that everybody uses that word, but I think we could find a compromise emblem at some point, and then over time, we would feel unified behind it. There's a lot more to what's going on in Mississippi than simply the flag. But I will say this: I've lived in 12 states, I've lived in 5 countries. Mississippi is a wonderful place. I describe Mississippi as really just being a big neighborhood, a big, friendly neighborhood. I've never met a Mississippian somewhere else that in 5 minutes we didn't know, have a mutual acquaintance.
Somebody in common.
There's no state in the nation like that. It's an amazing place to be. And
My husband and I went to Tokyo last year and ran into some people. You're right. Yeah, it's amazing. And you have to live other places to know that. We've been talking with Clay Moss. Thank you so much for coming in, a vexillologist, talking about the Mississippi state flag. It's 7:31 on the Gallo Show on SuperTalk Mississippi.